Thursday, March 12th, I started out with one of my clients and was very excited for what the day held. And then every time I checked my email, another gig was canceled. And concerts I was excited to go to of other people, of other bands were canceled. And then all the travel that I was hoping to do, including a ski trip to ski Whistler Blackcomb in British Columbia, was canceled. And I think, like all of us, we felt the doors shutting on all of the things that we were looking forward to. And interestingly, it was this transition point from the month of Adar, during which we celebrate Purim, into the month of Nisan. And one thing we don't think about very often, since we associate New Year's with the first day of Tishrei, or Rosh Hashanah, the biblical calendar would have us number the months starting from what just happened last Wednesday night, or last Wednesday, Tuesday night, which was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That is the first of the month, according to God's counting of the month. In fact, the very first commandment given to the Jewish people in the book of Exodus was when we were about to leave Egypt, the first thing we're told that we are now responsible for as free individuals is our time. Time is precious. You can't buy more of it. So one thing that teaches me is that even though we're all plagued with doubt and we're stuck in our homes for the most part, except for the people in Mississippi who are listening, for those of us in lockdown, we still have to make the most of every moment. Every moment is precious, and not to be sulking. And when it's sunny, to get outside in the sunshine, even if it's just in the area around your home to get some exercise. So that's the number one thing. So we're going to Rosh Chodesh Nisan. We're going into a new year. And Rosh Chodesh Nisan always brings with it this idea of entering the season of our freedom. This is Zman Cherutenu. So we're free, and yet we probably feel a little more imprisoned now than perhaps ever in our lives. Stuck in one place. So clearly the freedom that we're supposed to be experiencing now is a spiritual freedom. So that's what we're working on over the next hour, is appreciating the gift of our spiritual freedom and how that can bring us tremendous joy. One of the interesting things as we transitioned into our home lockdowns is a similar transition is going on in our spiritual calendar. We have the story that we read in the Purim festival just about 2 weeks ago, the Megillat Esther, where we learn about the exploits of Esther and Mordechai defeating the evil Haman. Boo! And in our angst, trying to deal with that horrible regime that wanted to create our demise, we tell the story of this incredible Jewish victory. So missing from the story, as we all know, in Megillat Esther, is mention of the name of God. Megillat Esther is one of the capstones of our canon of Jewish texts. And interestingly, God's name is missing. Another interesting fact is that when there are two Adars, right, because we have leap years, 7 times every 19 years, the Jewish people have a leap year. In order for our calendar to remain in sync with the solar calendar, because we are not just a lunar calendar people, we are a solar and lunar people. How do we know? Because Passover always has to happen in the springtime. So what we do is we add an extra month of Adar. So the rabbis in the Gemara and the Talmud were debating, when do we celebrate the holiday of Purim? In the first Adar or the second Adar? Now, if you're like me and you've got a big problem or something you got to take care of, instead of watching random YouTube videos, it's really good to just get into work and tackle that first problem, right? You with me? I'm seeing some of you on the front page here. Well, you would think that we would tackle the holiday of Adar the first opportunity we get, right? Seize the day to do a mitzvah. Say hineni, have zrizut, or alacrity, as Rashi would tell us, when performing a mitzvah. But no, it's not that way. Why? Because the holiday of Purim has to be juxtaposed always 30 days before Passover. Why? Because Purim connotes a certain spiritual maturity. This disease hit on the coattails of Purim. As a matter of fact, I look at my Purim where I was dressed in a very convincing Mr. Incredible suit, running around Los Angeles. I had 2 concerts over the course of the day and had the time of my life. At that point, we already knew that social distancing was important, but it was still, well, we'll just fist bump or bump elbows instead of shaking hands, right? It wasn't this 6 feet away, you must stay in your homes, social distancing, eat it. At least not in Los Angeles. Maybe New York was already there. So our Purim, even though we were supposed to be distancing, most of us were partying quite a bit. The event I played on Erev Purim, for the price of admission, had an open bar. And it was an event for 20-something singles. When 20-something singles have an open bar, especially with top shelf liquor as part of it, they take full advantage of what is offered. And the fist bumps and the elbow bumps turned into a full-on mosh pit on the dance floor with everybody arm in arm. Because we're Jewish people, it's Purim, we love each other, diseases be damned. Of course, in the next day or two, things got very serious, and that was the last time we did that. Purim represents our spiritual maturity as a nation. We've already gone through all the holidays in the biblical calendar. Remember, Adar is the last month of the year. So we've already had Pesach, Shavuot, all the high holidays, Sukkot, the season of our joy, all that teach us that God is here in manifold ways in our lives, guiding us, helping us, loving us. By the time we get to Purim, a seemingly godless story, it's at that point more than ever that we appreciate that God is always here, even if we're not seeing overt miracles. Then we have Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which we just celebrated, and we march towards Pesach, less than 2 weeks away now. Pesach is the holiday of manifold recitation of God's might and presence in our lives. In fact, the book that's associated with Passover, our beautiful Haggadah that we're all going to read in about a week and a half, all together with our families, just as it's meant to be, instead of on big Pesach programs. 25 of the last 26 years, I've led Passover for over 60 people. Because I'm on these big Pesach programs where I'm the musical entertainment and I lead a family Seder for the whole gang. This time I'm just going to have my 3 kids and my new daughter-in-law and my wife. That's it. It's simple. And when we read the Haggadah, the telling, as it's translated, there is no mention of the hero of the story's name, Moshe Rabbeinu. The 5 books of Moses are named after our hero Moses. But the Haggadah, where Moses bravely leads us out of Egypt, is not part of the dialogue. Why? Because we're going back to our spiritual infancy. The plagues, according to our rabbis, our sages, they tell us that the plagues happen over a 9-month period. It was the gestation of the nation of Jews. The first of Nisan, this period we just went into, we now re-enter our childhood, childlike innocence, emerging fresh into the desert. 49 days later, we find ourselves at Har Sinai, receiving the Torah. And God protects us like toddlers through our travails in the desert, as we read about in the book of Exodus. So it's interesting that this worldwide pandemic hits at this time. We're really very well aware of plagues. And what we need to do as Jewish people is turn this plague, which seems like a plague of darkness, into the opportunity to bring light to the world. Because that's what we do. We are a light unto nations. One of the big dilemmas I faced as a parent when this COVID-19 disaster became all too apparent, Israel cracked down first. Does everybody remember that the first place to start with the two-week quarantine on new arrivals into Ben Gurion Airport, into the airport, was Israel? Excuse me. I remember thinking, what, is Netanyahu crazy? Do you want to completely eliminate any semblance of tourism? Do you want to completely wipe out the economy? But Netanyahu realized exactly what was going on, and also realized that Israel could possibly be the first country to really eradicate this disease. It's a smaller population, they can control their borders. But my daughter, who made Aliyah last year, my Sarah, who's 20 years old, was now alone in her little apartment. She's going to Bar Ilan University right now. And she was miserable. And she was sad and lonely. And her roommate was gone most of the time because she was working in a market to make ends meet. And the classes that were supposed to go online from the university didn't go online right away. So my daughter, who thankfully also is a pianist, was left alone with her piano. And she called me a few times miserable, "Daddy, what am I going to do?" Then I read an IDF report from one of the top brass that this was going to go from 2 months to a year. Then I read the report that Israel was stopping all travel, that El Al would cease operations, and soon Israel would even deny entry to Israeli nationals. As any parents out there in the Limmud audience will likely commiserate, when your child is 10,000 miles away and this great sickness is covering the earth, you want your child to be close. And at first I told her, I think you should stay put. That turned into, please come home. Of course, it's your decision. But I was feeling a certain desperation and fear. My wife didn't want me to give into the panic. To make a long story short, I flew her home. She caught what I think might be the last flight out. And of course, I didn't want to fly her through Europe. I don't want her stopping in Madrid or Milan, right? I found, thank God, there was one United flight that was still going through San Francisco. And I managed to get her home. And when she arrived, I'm still not sure that I've done the right thing bringing her back to LA. Her flight number was 613. And for me, this was such a comfort. I guess I did the right thing after all. So, Abraham Joshua Heschel said that Judaism is not so much a religion of faith, it's a religion of action. As he put it, it's a leap of faith. It's not a leap of faith, it's a leap of action. So all of us, even though we're homebound, have the opportunity now to say Hineni, or here I am. Just like Moses said at the burning bush, just like Abraham said on his way up to the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. So that's the question, is how we are going to say Hineni, but do so joyfully in the face of great doubt. So at one point, I was at a low point in my life. I was pondering in the era of streaming music why nobody was interested in buying my 25 albums that I put out. One of the great gifts of being a composer and owning your own recording studio is that every year or so, I get to sneak in my own album. And now in the era of streaming, I was losing that part of my business. In the meantime, I was busier than ever with my travel schedule. My family needed me. I was feeling like I was being pulled in so many different directions, and I felt like I was no longer there for people who were in need. A friend whose name is Sherry Ziff became a professional coach, and she opted to take me on as one of her first clients. And she was wonderful, and it was empowering. And at one point, she started sensing that I was feeling a certain sense of desperation and concern about how I was going to pay the bills, and feeling like I never had enough time to do the things I needed to do. My joy was being extinguished by the circumstances I was facing. So she gave me a homework assignment one time. And that homework assignment was to go to the arts and crafts store called Color Me Mine. Nod your head if you have a Color Me Mine in your area. It's a place where you paint unfinished porcelain or clay objects, and then it's fired with your painting on it. Does that happen in any other community? Well, they have them here in LA in several places. She said, paint a plate, find a platter that they have, get the biggest one, paint it in your own beautiful design, and that's your homework. So I went to Color Me Mine. I painted a gorgeous plate that I hoped my wife would use for our Shabbat meals. It got fired. I went to pick it up a few days later. It was gorgeous, glowing, colorful. I gave it to my wife as a gift, and she put it in the attic, and I never saw it again. She didn't agree with my sense of decor. But I learned an important lesson, because when I met with my new success professional coach the next time, she said, so how did you feel about that project? I said, well, I really was into it. I loved painting. I'm a musician. I don't get to paint so much. It was fun. She said, Sam, what did you learn from this? I said, I don't know. She said, there's room on your plate for everything. You have a really big plate. We all have really big plates, and we are all being tested right now. There's room on our plate for everything. And yes, we will be working harder. And in spite of the fact that we might visit the market now and find that there's no toilet paper, and all we're thinking about is we've got to make Pesach now. How are we going to deal with all of these situations? There is room on our plate for everything we have to do. So I want to discuss Jewish joy. I specifically titled this class Jewish Joy. It's an unusual kind of joy that members of the tribe experience. And I'm not saying it's exclusive to us, but it's something that we can certainly relate to. Anyone who joins the tribe often joins the tribe when they convert because they see this sense of Jewish joy and they want a part of it. So what is that? What is true simcha? So simcha is distinguished from happiness. Our sages teach us that true simcha is a sense that all will go well in the future. Jewish joy is future tense joy. Happiness is here and now. I take an entire chapter in my book, right here, The Joy of Judaism, available at Amazon.com, selfless plug, to discuss all the various interpretations of what Jewish joy really means. But for us, happiness is more a here and now, going to a movie that's a great movie that makes you happy, a great meal, yum, 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 it was really good. it makes you happy. Jewish joy is different. Jewish joy is long-term. Where's the ultimate simcha one might experience? What is the word we use to describe something that is a celebration of a life cycle event, like a bar mitzvah, a bat mitzvah, a wedding? We call it a simcha. That is a simcha. That is true simcha. Why? Because through the events that transpired, seeing that little kid who could barely say his ABCs now stepping up to the bima and giving a credible speech, an impressive speech, a meaningful speech, or reading from the Torah, we feel like, oh, wow, the future for the Jewish people is going to be fine. The word nachas is sort of the code word of Jewish joy when it's a nachas moment. Nachas, or nachat, if you're Israeli, is something that my parents reminded me of multiple times in my childhood. My father, when he was reflecting on the accomplishments of his 4 sons, would say, ah, such nachas, you give me nachas. He made it clear that a life without nachas, or Jewish joy, is a life where it's just not worth much. In other words, I could make it as an individual in life, as a doctor or a lawyer, or a musician even. What kind of job is that for a nice Jewish boy? But if I made all the money in the world and I didn't have nachas, I did not make it. And we sense that. We know that our most joyful moments, the deepest moments, are when we connect with those who are in need. The prophet Micha says, what does God demand from you? To do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God. Those are our nachas moments, when we go above and beyond the call of duty. So really, this struggle that we're in currently is the chance to mine the deepest joy from our neshamot, from our souls. Is that clear? We're being pushed to the nth degree. And this is the time where we can really maximize that feeling of nachas, of giving, of deep needs satisfied for those who are needy around us. I live in a Jewish neighborhood in Los Angeles. Thankfully, and by the way, after this disease is passed, all of you are welcome to my home for Shabbat. Wherever I go in concert, I always welcome people. I have people from all over the world who've sat at my Shabbos table. Don't all come at once, that'll freak out my wife. But just know that if you go to samglaser.com, all my info is there. I'm very open, transparent. We love having Shabbat guests. We live in a neighborhood called Pico Robertson in Los Angeles. Show of hands, anybody been to my little shtetl? Okay, not so many of you. Well, hopefully we'll all be able to travel again. I'm just gonna look through my, who's here? Okay, no hands, all right. Anyway, when you come, try a weekend in this neighborhood to see what it's like in a community with 50 synagogues within 1 mile. Every walk of life is here in the Jewish world. If you want to daven with Israelis, if you want to daven with the French Moroccans, if you want to try what it's like to just go to a Persian-only shul, if you want to try the really super ultra-religious, if you want to try reform, conservative, it's all here. Everybody's one big happy family, and because it's LA and not New York, we actually say hello and good Shabbos to each other when we pass. Which is maybe why this disease is especially hard for us Los Angelinos. We're so friendly. We're so open-minded, our brains are falling out. We just want to be hugging each other and eating granola, right? Anyway, one of the gifts of living in this neighborhood is you get to go to everybody else's simchas. You are surrounded by simchas. And everybody knows people on every block. So one of the things I've been able to do, now that I'm homebound is when it comes time for Shabbat afternoon, and I'm feeling that after lunch food coma setting in, since I'll drink a cup of coffee after lunch usually, but not on Shabbat, I go to take a nap. This time I walked around to all the elderly people I know in the neighborhood. Not to make it sound like I'm such a tzaddik. I have a long way to go, believe me. But it dawned on me, there are people who likely have no connection with the outside world. And I can't go give them a big hug, but at least I can stop by and say good Shabbos. So I made the rounds. And I didn't go to my friend's house to just hang out. I went to some of the people who I know are elderly and are more affected than anyone else, because this COVID-19 issue could be, God forbid, a death sentence for them. And they are really, really frightened. It's not just theoretical, trying to avoid the spread of the virus or trying to flatten the curve. They're literally afraid for their lives. So remember Prophet Micha and his advice to just walk humbly with your God. Do acts of kindness. Those are the ultimate Jewish joy moments. Focusing on the good is one of the most important things we can do now. Living with a sense of Jewish joy is mentioned 88 times in our Bible, in our Tanakh. That's more than just about anything else that we find. The curses that are repeated twice throughout the Chumash, through our Torah, happen. Why? Because we didn't live with joy. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, serve God with joy. Joyous people are problem solvers, not problem sufferers. That was another Rabbi Noach Weinberg quote. How do we know about Jewish joy being part of our DNA in spite of all odds? All we have to do is look at the lives of our patriarchs and matriarchs. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Jacob, Rivka, Rachel. What did they go through? Very hard lives. Abraham finally makes it to the promised land. He does that Lech Lecha thing, gets there, and what happens? Famine. Has to leave, has to go to Egypt. Nothing but tsuris. Yitzchak thinks everything's going to be fine in his life. Tsuris. The nations around him are attacking. Everybody's jealous of him. He has issues with the king of Gerar, Avimelech. Yaakov, nothing but tsuris from beginning to end. I could spend the rest of this talk describing Yaakov's travails. And he just wants to retire. He finally gets out of the house of Lavan, and he gets to Israel, and what happens? Dinah's raped. Yosef sold into slavery. For all he knows, he's dead. So what we see is our patriarchs and our matriarchs minted Jewish joy in the time of suffering for all of us. That is what we have. That is our heritage. What a powerful heritage we have. This is the time when the going gets tough, the tough get going. We are the tough ones. The Torah repeatedly refers to our nation as a stiff-necked people. And that doesn't mean we wake up sore because we were sleeping funny and we can't turn our heads. It means we're sort of stubborn. We're tough. It's hard to make us change our ways. That's how we've kept this tradition going for the 3,400 or so years since we left Egypt on the 15th of Nisan. So it's that stubbornness that keeps us going through situations like this as well. Prophecy throughout Tanakh, for most of our prophets, requires that they are in a joyful place. I remember learning when I was first analyzing the Tehillim on my first trip to yeshiva, the Psalms of David sometimes start Mizmor LeDavid, and other times it's LeDavid Mizmor. And one of the thoughts that Chazal, our sages, tell us is that when it's Mizmor LeDavid, in order to get into a happy place, because there's no prophecy without joy, King David had to hear some songs. And he'd have his musicians play, and he'd play his harp, and they'd jam a little bit, and they would be tremendously comforted. Otherwise, Le David Mizmor, he was able to generate that joy from inside and didn't require the music to get to a happy place. Shortly after this Makkah, this plague befell us, I got together with a bunch of friends for a jam. We were already into the social distancing scene, so we sat outside this guy's home and we played long into the night. Now, when I'm playing in a jam session, being that I'm a professional pianist, I don't want to play the piano or I'll go crazy unless everybody is playing really well. But in a jam session where people can't quite keep the beat very well or the guitars are out of tune, I don't really mind as long as I'm not playing the piano. This is just something I've learned. So I played the bass. My friend had a bass, he had a bass amp, and bass, well, I don't play the bass, but it's challenging for me, and I can apply my technique that I know from the piano to the bass. I have never gotten such comfort out of music in my entire life as I did that night. I can't explain why exactly, other than the fact that I didn't know I was in such a sad place until I started playing. Because we're in this place of limitation, that doesn't mean we can't crank up our stereo and dance around the room. We can. And we can wear that outfit we were saving for the next wedding or for Pesach. And you know what? We can start drinking wine now. We don't have to wait for the 4 cups at our Seder, assuming that drinking wine is a good idea for you. So finding Jewish joy is crucial. Just like our prophets required a joyful place to receive prophecy, all of us are prophetic in our own way. When we pray, we are sending great vibes back and forth. Prayer is reflexive, right? Lehit Palel is something we're doing for ourselves. The first time we see the word for prayer in our Torah is when Yaakov asks, or when Yosef asks Yaakov, his father, to bless his sons. And if you remember, Yaakov switches his hands around. He puts his right hand on the younger son. And Yosef is thinking, oy vey, Dad, don't do more favoritism. That didn't go well when I was a kid. Please don't show favoritism. Don't choose one son over the other. But Yaakov said, this is the best way to do it. Ephraim is superior to Manasseh. And because the 2 brothers got along and there wasn't sibling rivalry, and they both accepted each other's strengths, that's why to this date, when we're blessing our children at the Friday night dinner table, our sons, we bless them to be like Ephraim and Manasseh. They were the sons that got along. Yaakov required this kind of joy of seeing his grandchildren to be able to access the inner workings of prophecy. Another aspect of joy I wanted to touch upon is that it's real easy to sink the joy boat. And we all have friends who complain. We know when we call them, we're going to hear about all the tsuris that they're going through. My wife at a certain point asked me to stop sending her links to learn more about the coronavirus. Anytime I'd hear some good pundit that I thought was reliable or some graph that accurately presented the travails that we are in, I would send them to her. She says, I just don't want to know anymore. So it's good to stay informed and maybe check it when you wake up in the morning because you're curious what went on in the world. But then I recommend a news fast. And if you've got friends that love to just talk about this disease and all the terrible things we're going through, ask them nicely, can we just focus on the good? Can we talk about something uplifting? And for some people, that will be a very short conversation because they have nothing else to say to you. So that's a recommendation. another way to increase Jewish joy in our lives is to accept the current reality as perfect. We have a God who loves us and who created the world to bestow good. We don't understand why, but something is good about this situation that we're in now. I don't understand it. I can't put my finger on it. But we know that if we have a good God, there is goodness behind this. On Rosh Hashanah, how do we greet each other? We say, Shana Tova U'Mituka. We know it will be a Shana Tova, right? Because God is only good. Of course it's going to be a good year, regardless what happens. But we also want it to be sweet. The highest level of heaven, as I just learned in another shiur I was in this morning, a class, the highest level of heaven is called sweetness in Kabbalah. We want our year to be sweet. In other words, we want the good to be revealed. Right now, the good is not so revealed. So we pray that our year be good and sweet, and that we have understanding after some period of time about what this is all about. I had a favorite columnist in Keyboard Magazine, one of the trade publications I read here in my recording studio. And that columnist would write that you cannot judge your current state until 5 years have gone by. He called it the 5-year plan. So we all need a 5-year plan. We have to know that we're going to get through this. So I see that some people are nodding off. It's interesting how you can watch people, they're in their comfort of their own home, and yet, so I am singing for you now, just to wake everybody up, a song I wrote when this virus kicked in about my blues, about being quarantined. I wrote it with a new friend named Anthony Marks. And it goes something like this. So wake up! Can you hear it all right? My peace of mind is stuck on quarantine. I can't think straight because of COVID-19. I live in fear that this will be my fate. I drink a beer and try to isolate. Stuck in quarantine. Stuck in quarantine. My peace of mind is stuck in quarantine. Each text and post in every magazine. I change the channel and it's always there. Pandemic parties raging everywhere. Skies beckon me outside to the sunshine. Crowds appear to greet the day. Shopping malls and concert halls bursting with humanity. I'll just stay inside my room, alone in my room. My peace of mind is stuck in quarantine. I can't think straight because of COVID-19. I watch TV and see the market drop. I guess I'd care if I just had some stop. Stuck in quarantine. I'm stuck in quarantine. I'm stuck in quarantine. Thank you very much. It's not that song, but another song I wrote about the same situation. which is called If Only Love Spread Like a Virus. I wrote that song right when this kicked in. Beth Schaefer, a wonderful singer, songwriter friend of mine in the Jewish world, released that song, or sent a post with that statement. And my wife ran into the recording studio and said, Sam, what do you think? You write a song, If Only Love Spread Like a Virus. So I did, right at that moment. And it wound up that night on the TV news, which just shows you when you post something to YouTube, you just never know what might happen. Everybody happy? Everybody ready? Jewish joy, you feeling it? Okay, good. Okay, we got 13 more minutes. Let's make them count. I'm only halfway done with my spiel. Darn. So, thanks for sticking with me. A few more items I want to discuss, and I'm just going to cut to the chase. Jewish struggle is our legacy. We are those who fight with God. When did Yaakov Avinu, Jacob our forefather, get the name Yisrael? I'll look at my text to see who remembers. Yaakov got a new name, and it happened right at a certain moment. First person there wins a free download of a Sam Glaser album. Boom! With a being. Okay, we'll give it to Mickey. And Alice says, more music, please. Tali says, sing If Only It Spread, sacrifice. Okay, whatever. Well, Mickey won. Mickey, make sure you text me your email, okay? Anyway, so Yaakov is struggling with an angel. It's going extremely badly. It looks like the angel's going to win. It's the angel of Esav, disguised as a man. He gets wounded on his Gidha Nashe, the sinew, the sciatic nerve, which is why Jewish people to this date, when you keep kosher, you don't eat that nerve. That's why when I go to a fancy Jewish restaurant, kosher restaurant, and I'm spending $50 on my steak, it's not going to be filet mignon, folks. Sad but true. At least not where I go. So in that struggle, he did emerge victorious, and at that point, that angel, that entity, the archangel of Esav, names him Yisrael, which means to struggle with God. So we are strugglers. We live for the struggle. When we're put into a position where we have to struggle, that's when we get going. That's when we get tough. Imagine going to a movie without a plot. You're going to walk out. Like, did anyone see Cats? Just kidding. Cats is a work of art, and Andrew Lloyd Webber, I know, T.S. Eliot, was very beautiful. But a movie without a plot, it almost doesn't exist. That's why that movie was so weird. I mean, what was the plot? Nobody's quite sure. There's always got to be a hero. There's always got to be a villain. There's got to be something we're struggling against, or we wouldn't stay tuned. We're just not interested. We'd be sound asleep. Here's a beautiful story that I heard. I actually wrote about it in my book, in the struggle chapter, and I worded it very carefully, so I'm going to read it verbatim. One day, a boy found a fuzzy caterpillar and put it in a cage as a new pet. Soon he observed the fascinating metamorphosis as the caterpillar disappeared within a cocoon. He checked the crusty shell daily and eventually noticed a small opening. As he hoped, a butterfly was emerging. The boy waited impatiently and feared it was stuck. He took a scissors and gently opened the hole so the creature could escape. Sure enough, the butterfly inched out with a large swollen body and small, misshapen wings. Sadly, those wings never grew properly, and the malformed insect spent its last days haplessly crawling around the cage. The boy learned that wings only develop when butterflies mount a tenacious struggle to escape their cocoons. His misguided act of kindness led to the creature's doom. Like the butterfly, Judaism teaches that life's struggles strengthen us and give us the ability to fly. A theological maxim dictates God only gives us tests we can pass. Ideally, we accept our trials as proof of God's love for us, proof God wants us to maximize our potential. In the words of poet Leonard Cohen, forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Tests are not an interruption of your life. They are your life. So we love getting coached. We love going to seminars where we find out a better way to do stuff. People in my neighborhood, and granted I live right outside of Beverly Hills, seems like everybody has their own psychologist or personal success coach, helping them measure up in the world. We love to receive tochacha, or rebuke, or criticism that's powerful and accurate and helpful. The reprimand that we get in the form of God's love is sometimes hurtful and we can't handle it. Like one more thing on my plate, it's going to collapse. The straw is going to break the camel's back. But indeed, we know as Jewish people that struggling is where we get going. The first tremendous struggle that we learn about, and the reason that Abraham is the first Jew and not Noah, the guy who built the ark, is because Noah accepted his job to build the ark. For 120 years, he labored over it, didn't run around and try to do outreach to all his peers. Whereas Abraham recognized that he was responsible for everybody's well-being. Kol Yisrael arevim zeh ba'zeh, we learn in our Talmud. All of Israel is responsible for one another. And at that point in history, Abraham wasn't arguing that he should have his relatives saved, although he did want Lot to survive this experience in Sodom. He wanted the entire city to be spared. If only there was 50 righteous people, please God, spare that city. I know it's an evil city, but just for 50, okay, not 50, maybe 45. Oh, not 45, maybe 40. And if not 40, if there's only 30, okay, if not 30, then 20. God, excuse my temerity. If it be your will, at least if there's 10 righteous people. We get the concept of minyan, or the fact that we all have to be together based on Abraham's plea. Part of the pain we're feeling is that we cannot daven together as a minyan. That is the legacy we get from this initial struggle mounted by our forefather, Abraham. All of us have this in our DNA. We cannot stand idly by our neighbor's blood. We want so badly for everyone else in the world to live happily and safely and easily. Jewish people per capita of all religious groups give more to charity than any others. We are the ones who started Jewish World Watch here in Los Angeles. Jewish World Watch is not for Jews who are in trouble. It's for those in trouble in Sudan and in Bangladesh, in Rwanda. We are upset to the core, and maybe what distinguishes us as a people is we do something about it. We can't stand seeing people hurting. So this magaifa, this horrible plague that we're going through, is an opportunity to reach out more than ever. And I say this for myself as well as everybody else. There are things that we can do in our communities. We can set aside our time, even at a time when it seems like we should have a hoarding mentality, to reach out and to look out for other people. That's our Jewish joy. That is our nachas. So I give all of you the blessing that we get out of this quickly and speedily. May we all be healthy. May we all come out of this horrible situation with a sense of Jewish unity, with a sense of longingness to be together. Whereas we may not have shown up in the synagogue, except for maybe Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, maybe we feel a angst in our heart that this not being able to go daven with a minyan on Shabbat, we want it to happen so badly now that we're going to make a point of doing that. Bring God into your lives. Know that Jewish joy is our birthright, and it comes rooted in struggle. It's rooted in the future. I want to leave you with a song. This is one I wrote on my second album. I was in my late 20s. I was trying so hard to have a career in music. It looked like all the odds were stacked against me. All my relatives, every time they saw me, would say, Sammy, music, come on, what kind of job is that? How long can you do that? Can you support a family with music? But I'm a pretty tenacious guy. I'm stiff-necked. And I decided I was going to do it anyway. And thank God that album caught on. And there were several songs on it that became hits, if you will, in the Jewish world. And shortly thereafter, Kirk Douglas wound up at my Shabbos table because some rabbi in Israel named David Aaron said, you know, Kirk, when you go back to LA, now that you love learning Torah, go to Sam Glaser's Shabbat table. There's a lot of joy there. Kirk came and became a regular and fell in love with my music. And when it was time to do my third album, Across the River, it was Kirk that wrote the check for its production. It all stemmed out of this effort. So this is a song I wrote at the darkest point, and it's called Lift My Eyes. And I sing it as a blessing for all of us, that we have Esa Einai El HaHarim Me'ayin Yavo Ezri, that we lift our eyes to our Creator who loves us, who gives us struggle so that we grow, who wants us only to be joyful. 88 times it's mentioned we should be joyful, serve God with joy. Thank you for joining me. Stay in touch at samglaser.com. Sign up for my newsletter. I send it out every month. And l'chaim. Here comes the song. It's been a long time since I've said I love you. It's been a while since I've said anything at all. Captive in a fortress of my choosing, and it's time that I tore down the wall. Lift my eyes to see the light within the darkness. Lift my spirit to appreciate your hand. Lift my eyes to see the questions and the answers I don't understand. It's been a long time since I've kept a promise. It's been a while since I have had a single goal. All my dreams are being held for ransom, 'cause I cannot find the self-control. Lift my eyes to see the truth for the illusion. Lift my heart to see the good inside the pain. Lift my eyes to see the reasons for your wishes that I can't explain. Lift my eyes to see the light within the darkness. Lift my spirit to appreciate your hand. Lift my eyes to see the answers to the questions I don't understand. Lift my eyes. El Harim, Me'ayin Yavo Ezri Me'im Hashem said, Shamayim Varetz. Hashem Oseh Shamayim Baaretz. Lift my eyes, oh, lift my eyes to see the reason for your hand. Lift my eyes to see the answers to the questions I don't understand. Lift my eyes to see the truth for the illusion. Lift my spirit to see the good inside the pain. Lift my eyes to see the reason for your wishes that I can't explain. Lift my eyes. Thank you, my friends.